In the last section, you learned that MLS input is a public-facing marketplace record, and that the safest rule is simple. Once the listing is entered, changes must be supported by written seller authorization and saved to the file. Now we take the next step and connect MLS compliance directly to contract writing theory and real-world Arizona practice. This section is about integration. The MLS is not separate from the listing agreement. It is an extension of it. When you understand that, you stop thinking like a data entry person and start thinking like a contract manager. MLS input is contract performance, not clerical work. When a listing agreement is signed, the broker receives authority to market the property and cooperate with other brokers. MLS input is how that marketing authority becomes visible to the marketplace. The moment a listing is entered into our MLS, you are publishing a legally relevant data record that will be relied upon by buyers, buyer brokers, appraisers, underwriters, title companies, escrow officers, and potentially courts. That reliance is why MLS accuracy becomes a professional conduct issue under AAC R4281101 and why careless MLS work can become grounds for discipline under ARS paragraph 32-153 when it results in misrepresentation, negligence, or failure to exercise reasonable care. The legal foundation why MLS rules matter in contract writing. Arizona contract writing is built on authority and enforceability. A listing agreement is not marketing permission. It is a contract that creates duties and expectations. MLS rules requiring a fully executed listing agreement before entry directly reinforce contract formation principles you teach: authority to act, lawful purpose, and enforceable terms. If a property is filed in MLS without a properly executed listing agreement, the licensee risks operating without authority. That is not just an MLS problem. That is a contract validity and licensing risk. Metropolitan Phoenix example. A new agent rushes to enter a listing in Mesa because the seller wants it live tonight. The seller has not signed the listing agreement yet. The agent inputs it anyway. The seller later disputes the listing terms and claims they never authorized public marketing. The MLS entry becomes evidence of unauthorized action and creates exposure for the agent and the broker. Clear cooperation timing. When marketing triggers MLS duties, MLS timing rules are triggered by public marketing. The second you place a sign, post on social media, publish to a brokerage website, or send an email blast, your MLS timeline begins. That is why contract writing and marketing are inseparable. The listing agreement gives marketing authority, but MLS rules determine when you must file and how quickly you must update status once the transaction changes legally. Phoenix Metro implementation habit. The moment the seller signs the listing agreement, you do two things immediately. You confirm the marketing election in writing, and you plan the MLS entry timeline so you do not accidentally violate clear cooperation through early public marketing. Written authorization for all changes operational contract control. Here is the contract law concept hiding inside MLS operations. A seller cannot be bound by unilateral changes to material terms. In the listing agreement, modifications must be in writing. In MLS rules, changes require written seller authorization and must be retained. This is the same legal principle in two different systems. The listing agreement governs the relationship. MLS rules govern the publication of that relationship to the market. Your job is to control both with documentation. Gilbert example. A listing is entered at $525,000. The seller sends a message saying, drop it to $515,000. If you update without capturing clear written authorization that is retained, you have created a marketplace modification without documented consent. 2 weeks later, the seller claims they never approved it. Your memory is not evidence. Your written documentation is evidence. Discussion. Question. Why is written authorization an MLS rule and also a contract writing principle? Answer. Because MLS changes alter the public representation of a contractual relationship. Written authorization proves consent, prevents disputes, and protects against claims of misrepresentation or unauthorized action. Types of listings, accepted and their contract implications. MLS input begins with contract structure. ARMLS accepts certain listing types because they are enforceable, clear, and consistent with cooperative marketplace rules. Students should understand the practical contract writing impact of this. If you take a listing type that is not MLS eligible, you may not be able to publish it in the MLS even if the seller wants exposure. This reinforces why Arizona-approved forms and correct listing agreement structure matter. Manufactured and mobile home contract complexity in Arizona practice. This is where students must slow down. MLS filing depends on how the home is conveyed and where it sits. A manufactured home affixed and conveyed with real property is not the same as a park scenario. If the contract structure is wrong, the MLS filing can be improper and the transaction can derail during title review. Seller Options Office. Exclusive and coming soon. Informed consent in writing. Sellers may want privacy, delayed exposure, or controlled marketing. MLS systems may allow office exclusive or coming soon options, but these choices require informed consent and proper signed disclosures, acknowledging what the seller is giving up. This is not marketing preference. This is contract counseling. The seller must understand that reduced exposure can impact pricing, competition, and days on market. Scottsdale. Example: a luxury seller wants no MLS exposure because they do not want neighbors to know they are selling. The broker explains the trade-off. Fewer buyers may see it, which can reduce leverage. The seller signs the required exempt or limited marketing disclosure, acknowledging the benefits being waived. That is fiduciary duty in action, because you are ensuring informed consent rather than blindly following instructions. Discussion. Question: why does a seller's choice to limit exposure require a signed disclosure rather than a casual verbal instruction? Answer: because limiting exposure changes the marketing scope and can impact value and leverage. Written informed consent protects the seller and protects the broker by documenting that consequences were explained and accepted. MLS data accuracy as a contractual duty, not marketing fluff. MLS remarks and fields are representations. The market relies on them. Buyers often decide whether to tour a property based on MLS data. Appraisers use MLS data as part of market analysis. Underwriters review information for risk. If the MLS record is wrong, the transaction can be delayed or litigation can follow. That is why MLS accuracy ties directly to reasonable care and the prohibition against misrepresentation. Phoenix Metro. Example: an agent lists square footage as 2,100 based on owner estimate without verifying any source. The appraisal comes in showing 1,950. The buyer claims they overpaid based on MLS representation. Even if the seller provided the number, the licensee must document the source and avoid careless certainty. The MLS entry becomes evidence. Discussion. Question: what is the safest way to handle square footage input when there are conflicting sources? Answer: use a defensible source. Accurately identify the source in MLS, avoid guessing, and document seller-provided information in writing for the file. Status reporting and the contract execution timeline. Once the legal reality changes, the MLS record must change. If the contract is executed, the status must reflect the transaction status within required timeframes. If the property closes, the sold status must be timely and accurate. This is where students learn the discipline of contract to MLS synchronization. A signed contract is not just a milestone, it is a compliance trigger. Practical implementation habit. Every time you get a signed contract, your next thought should be, what MLS update is required and what written documentation must be saved to the file? Commission transparency changes and MLS limitations. A critical boundary for contract writers is this: compensation is governed by the listing agreement and any separate employment agreement. MLS publication rules may restrict what can be displayed regarding compensation. Students must learn to separate these concepts cleanly. The listing agreement controls compensation. The MLS controls publication and does not function as a compensation negotiation tool. This reinforces the theme of modern practice. Compensation is negotiated between parties and documented in the appropriate agreements, not broadcast in the MLS system. Media and remarks, compliance photos, public remarks, and fair housing. MLS is not your personal marketing page. Photos must comply with MLS rules, and public remarks must focus on property description and transaction terms without inducements, branding, or discriminatory language. Violations are not just MLS fines. They can become broker supervision issues under AAC, R4-28-1103, and professional conduct problems under AAC, R4-28-1101. MESA. Example: an agent uploads photos with a logo watermark. The MLS flags and removes them. The brokerage is now dealing with a compliance violation that could have been prevented with training and review. Broker supervision, documentation, and record retention. MLS compliance is supervision. Designated brokers in Arizona are responsible for systems and oversight. That is why every MLS action must be documentable. Written price changes, written marketing elections, written status confirmations, and saved communications belong in the transaction file consistent with ARS, paragraph 32-2151.01, record retention expectations. Students should learn that good documentation is not paranoia. It is professional protection. Arizona brokerage scenario. Operational contract law in real time. ABC Realty in Mesa signs a listing agreement. The agent posts it on Instagram that afternoon. The public marketing clock starts. The listing must be entered into MLS within 1 business day. The seller wants coming soon for privacy. The agent obtains the signed disclosure for that election. On day 15, the seller accepts an offer. The agent updates the status within the required time frame and saves the executed contract and seller instructions in the file. The property closes. The final sale data is reported promptly. Every step is contract management. Every step is compliance. Course discussions with answers. Course discussion 1. If a seller verbally authorizes a price reduction but refuses to provide written authorization, should the agent update the MLS answer? No. Without written authorization, you do not change MLS data. The agent should request written confirmation by text or email and explain that MLS is a public marketplace record that requires documented seller consent. Course discussion 2. A property is marketed on Facebook but is not yet in the MLS. Is that allowed? Answer: only if the property is entered into MLS within the required timeline triggered by public marketing. Public marketing activates the filing obligation. Course discussion 3. Can an agent include buyer-broker bonus language or invitations to discuss compensation in MLS public remarks? Answer: no. MLS remarks must comply with MLS rules and cannot be used to publish compensation offers or inducements. Compensation belongs in the appropriate agreements and negotiations outside the MLS platform. Key learning takeaways for students. MLS input is contract performance, not data entry. Written authorization controls all listing modifications and protects enforceability. Public marketing triggers MLS timing obligations automatically. MLS accuracy and status updates are part of reasonable care and fiduciary duty expectations. MLS violations can escalate into broker supervision problems and ADRI discipline exposure.